Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got another really interesting test to run. We have tested these shells before, but in a slightly different variation with some pretty mediocre results. But we've got a little bit different shot size of them out here today. Maybe they'll be a little bit better, but we've also got two different chokes to run them through, and they're about as far on opposite ends of the spectrum as you can really get. So we may see one really good result and one really terrible result. It may be pretty mediocre across the board, or they both could be pretty bad. So I don't know exactly what we're going to get yet. We're just going to have to try it and see maybe which end of the spectrum as far as choke goes that these shells might actually prefer, if anything. Before the shells I've got today, I brought out some more of these Fiocchi Golden Turkey loads, but these ones are a 20 gauge. They're a 3-inch, 1¼ ounce payload of lead 6s, moving about 1,200 feet per second. Like I just said, we have tried some of these shells, but in the 5-shot version, as well as testing them in 12 gauge also. But the 20 gauge 5s were very mediocre at best. These are the 6s. Do I think 6s are going to make for a magical combination? Probably not. I still think we're in for some mediocre results, but I hope they prove me wrong. They're a nickel plated shell that has a wad in there, but it's much more of like your field or target style wad rather than a full length turkey wad, and they're not buffered at all either. So all of that does play into our pattern limitations, as well as them just being a lead 20 gauge load in the first place. Lead turkey loads in 20 gauge, you're a pretty confident 30-yard and in type of gun. It's a little harder to get them to pattern out farther than that, 35-40 yards, unless you're running either TSS or a Winchester Longbeard XR lead load essentially. But we'll see how these do through our two different chokes anyway, because they might work or they might not. As for the setup that we're running, I brought out the Stevens 301 20 gauge. It's got a vector red dot on top with a 26-inch barrel, and like I said, we've got two different chokes that we're going to run side by side. Those being these two chokes. Now these are about as far apart as they can get, not only flush versus extended, but in constriction as well. Our extended choke is a Carlson's heavyweight TSS. This is a 555 constriction, so getting down there into the tighter realm for a 20 gauge choke. So we've got our really tight option, and then we've got a flush choke, that being just an extra full 585 constriction flush choke. So way different in constriction, way different in style. These flush chokes, I think this was probably like $18 or something. Meanwhile, these Carlson's chokes are $60 to $70, somewhere right in there. So way different ends of the spectrum. So they're way opposites of each other. And although it's not necessarily a direct comparison between two similar chokes, we should at least have an idea on what these shells will do through a lot of constriction and not all that much constriction for a 20 gauge turkey choke. So for our test today, we're running everything the same as usual. I've got both turkey targets set up side by side at 40 yards. So we'll get you guys a view of those targets. We'll start with the Carlson's 555, and then we'll go to just the flush 585 extra full. We'll put them side by side and see what the difference actually is. I don't know what we're going to get just yet or which one's going to be the better option for these shells, but let's take some shots and see what we get. Okay, so for the velocities we got out of those two shells, we have a boss claim of 1200. The shot with the Carlson's 555 gave us 1260. So running a little above that claim, and the shot from the flush 585 choke gave us 1204. So still a little bit above the 1200 claim, but averaging mid 1200s or so it would appear. So I mean, we're seeing what we should be seeing for velocity, and we're not really pushing them overly quick just yet. So we may have a chance of getting them to pattern, but let's head down to 40 and see what the difference is between our two chokes. All right, so now we're down here at our 40-yard targets, and we see some pretty mediocre results, kind of like what I was expecting out of them. On the left, we have the Carlson's 555 choke pattern. On the right, we have the flush extra full 585 choke pattern. And although I wouldn't say either one of them is very impressive, I think we may have a little bit better pattern over there on the right with the flush extra full choke. That's the less fancy of the two chokes, and it may have worked out in our favor a little bit better. That that pattern on the right might be a little more even. It might have a little more circular shape to it around the very far edges. And I think we have a handful more of them right around the turkey's head area where you'd want them to be at. So believe it or not, I think that's probably going to show up as the better pattern. But first, we'll have an up-close look at the Carlson's 555 choke pattern. We do indeed have a dead turkey. There are two kind of right on the front edge of the brain up there, and we did have a couple that would have clipped the spine going down his neck. So it would have technically killed that turkey. You would have had several body shots as well, and you better have hoped that there's not another bird close to him, because you may have cleared them out as well. Overall, I mean, we pretty much covered the entire patterning board with shot from top to bottom, almost out to the very corners as well. Not anything overly condensed, no hot core to it whatsoever. I mean, that would make for a pretty decent wing shooting pattern. You've got good coverage across there. It's a pretty even spread of them as well. There are a couple little bit larger holes kind of showing up around the edges of the turkey target itself, but still, if you were using these for some kind of upland bird or dove or something like that, you would absolutely be able to do the job out to 40 yards. And I have a feeling a lot of Fiocchi's loads are pretty much the same, so it would not surprise me if these are pretty well the same as the golden pheasant line and stuff like that, thus why we're seeing this type of pattern. But now moving over to the right with our flush extra full 585 constriction choke. This is 30 thousandths less constriction, and I actually think we have a little bit more condensing in our pattern. I think we've got more pellets right around that bird's head and neck area than what we saw with the Carlsons. And if you look around the edges, it kind of looks almost like a resemblance of a circular pattern starting to show up. So I think the overall spread is brought in a little bit. And with 20 gauge and lead loads, sometimes less choke won't hurt you. We've found a few different lead loads that don't mind chokes in the 575 to 585 range. And this flush extra full has shown us a couple nice patterns as well as we've tested it with TSS loads and stuff. So is this an impressive pattern? No, it's still kind of the small game wing shooting looking pattern. And it would do great for that. Maybe a few less of those bigger voids than what we saw with the Carlsons. Is it turkey capable out to 40? Also, yes. You've got a couple through the brain and another couple right in the middle of the spine down there. So that would technically work, but again, you're reaching the top of the range limitations with this. Although I do think you got a better opportunity here. So interesting to see these two side by side. Similar results, but not exactly the same either. So let's pull the targets down. I'll draw some big circles, count some pellets, and we'll actually see the difference in hard numbers between these two patterns. Which one has more through the core and which one is more open. Okay, so now we've got our targets out of our way, everything is circled and counted, and we can really see the difference between these patterns, which isn't much. The numbers don't lie, and they're very similar, although we definitely have a winner. Again, Carlson's 555 on the left, flush extra full 585 on the right, and what I was seeing and talking about earlier, I think is exactly the case here, now that we've got the targets out of the way. Starting over on the left, this is our Carlson's 555. We have a 10 and 20 inch circle drawn around our pattern. Inside of our 10 inch core, there's 35 pellets, so not a ton of them to work with, but technically good enough, although that is what I would call the range absolute limit for turkey application. 30 yards and in, it would still be perfectly fine. Outside of that, within the 20-inch ring, we pick up an additional 73 pellets. It's got a few more of them down the right side compared to what we see over on the left, kind of that bottom left corner. So that is a little bit of a thin zone like we were looking at earlier. Overall, just generic small game wing shooting looking pattern here that would technically work for turkeys, but definitely not my ideal combination, at least all the way out here at 40. Now moving over to the right with our flush extra full 585, we've still got the same 10 and 20 inch circles drawn, but within our 10 inch core, we now have 47 total pellets as compared to only 35 with the Carlsons. So we gain a handful of them in the core. It didn't really make a massive difference because this is still kind of the top of the range capability. Again, 35 and in for sure. Definitely 30 yards and in is kind of the sweet spot for these from what we've seen out out of them so far, and that still remains the case here. Outside of that, in the 20-inch, we pick up 73 additional pellets, which is the exact same as what we saw with the Carlsons. So almost identical patterns, but you got a handful more of them right in the core area. But it's not a massive amount to where it really makes that big of a difference. Around the edges, though, it does look a little more condensed than what we saw with the Carlsons, which is exactly what we were seeing earlier. Overall, this is technically the winning pattern, and that's just a flush extra full choke. Nothing fancy like the Carlsons. So very interesting to see these two results side by side. I figured there was a possibility that with it being a lead load and a 20 gauge, that the more open flush choke might actually perform better. And technically, I was pretty close to being correct on that. Obviously, these are pretty interchangeable patterns, very close in the numbers, and neither one of them are great 40-yard turkey patterns across the board, really. It's a cheap lead load that's basically loaded, so we know that they're going to be pretty limited, and that's exactly what we see here. And here are the two wads out of those shells. You've got your Carlson's 555 on the left, your extra full flush 585 on the right. Pretty much the same. You might be able to tell that the wad on the left went through a little more choke constriction, but they did pretty much the same thing overall. Obviously, this is not a full-length turkey wad or anything. You've definitely got pellets stacked above the wad. So just your basic field load type of stuff here. That's another big reason why these pattern like a field load would, because they are essentially loaded like one. But nothing out of the normal that I wouldn't really expect to see as far as this goes. All right, well, what do we think about these results right here? I think we've pretty well covered it. They are both pretty mediocre turkey patterns. 40 yards is starting to push your range limitations for sure. 30 yards and in, either one of these would serve the same purpose. I mean, we saw how close the numbers are. Technically speaking, I think the flush choke is the tiny bit better pattern, but I mean, you could interchange these, and I bet if we took multiple shots, these would remain about the same, or potentially go back and forth by a couple pellets. So I think it did about what I thought we would see. Two pretty mediocre patterns, nothing great, even for a lead load in a 20 gauge. Any of your Remington Nitro Turkey, Federal Grand Slam, Winchester Double X loads, I mean, they're all going to be better than what this is. And we obviously know how limited lead is in a 20 gauge at 40 yards. Usually it's a 30 yard and in, maybe 35 yard and in reliable combination. So nothing too unexpected overall for what these shells are, but I figured it'd be interesting to try them through the two extremes of the chokes that I've got, two different styles, two way different constrictions, and see what the difference is, and it's not much. So I think we can test whatever combination of choke in the middle we want, and it's probably still going to be about the same overall. But you'll have to let me know what you want to see down in the comments, as well as what are your thoughts about these two. Is this about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of the 20 gauge Golden Turkey shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Which option do you think won it out today? Or which one do you prefer? And would you ever go out turkey hunting with either one of these combos? Or would you prefer to have a little better shell? And again, what other stuff do you want to see us run with these shells? What other choke combos, constrictions, that sort of stuff? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, you have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it. But I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.